What if your next meal wasn't a choice, but a chore? No kitchen, no seasoning, no fresh fruit. Just a chunk of dark bread so hard you have to soak it to bite. A pot of lumpy gruel that tastes like with smoke and regret. And if you're lucky, a sliver of salted meat that smells like the inside of a boot. Welcome to dinner in the Middle Ages. This isn't a food fantasy, it's a survival story. For peasants, food meant whatever they could grow, catch, or beg for. For nobles, it was a display of wealth, often at the cost of their health. For everyone, it was unreliable, unsafe, and deeply unappetizing. In this episode of History Hives, we're stepping back into a world where hunger ruled every hour of the day, and where eating wasn't about taste, it was about staying alive. So, settle in. Maybe grab a snack, preferably not medieval, and prepare to discover what medieval people really ate, because it was awful. You wake up to the sound of footsteps, soft ones, bare feet brushing across the packed dirt floor. The sun is still low. Pale light leaks through the wooden shutters, casting long shadows across the room. You sit up slowly, feeling the cold in your bones. There's no fire yet. No warmth except the faint body heat left in the straw mattress beside you. Someone's already moving about. You smell the faint scent of smoke drifting in from the hearth. A child coughs. A wooden bowl is being filled. This is breakfast. In a medieval village, breakfast is not a moment of leisure. It's not eggs and bacon. There's no coffee, no sugar, not even a table to sit around. You eat because your body demands it, not because you enjoy the food. On the floor near the hearth sits a wooden bowl of barley gruel. It's pale, thin, a watery mix of oats or barley boiled just long enough to soften. There's no milk in it, no honey, no spice. If you're lucky, there might be a tiny piece of leek floating inside, or a pinch of lard stirred through, a luxury to make it slide down easier. You pick up a wooden spoon, cracked from years of use. You don't think about taste. You think about survival. Beside the gruel there's bread, but not the kind you're used to. This isn't fluffy or light. It doesn't smell like a bakery. This bread is heavy, a thick round of coarse rye or barley, sometimes even oats. It's dense, gritty, and blackened on the bottom. If the harvest was poor the year before, the flour might have been stretched with other things. Bits of bark, ground acorns, even powdered clay. Anything that fills the belly, whether it belongs there or not. You bite into the bread. It's hard. Your teeth don't sink, they grind. If it's too tough, you soak it in ale or in the hot gruel. Not to improve the taste, but just to soften it enough to chew. This is the foundation of your diet. Bread and gruel. Day after day. Week after week. You aren't starving, exactly, but you're never full either. Hunger is a quiet companion. It follows you around like a shadow. You learn to live with it. The ache in your belly is as familiar as the ache in your back. Food in the village is a daily worry. Will the stores last through winter? Will the grain stretch until harvest? Will the rye rot before it bakes? If the weather turns bad, if the rains come too hard, or not at all, hunger gets louder. More urgent. More dangerous. You've heard of people eating boiled nettles in spring, of chewing on bark just to silence the emptiness for a while. In the very worst years, the rumors come back that someone found bones in the village ditch, that someone's dog disappeared, that a child vanished. You don't talk about those years, but everyone remembers. When food is short, you stretch it. You share it. You do not waste a single crumb. Yesterday's bread becomes today's soup. The tough crusts get softened in broth, or ale, or even water. Nothing is thrown away. Not when it might be needed tomorrow. At midday, if you're working in the fields, lunch is more of the same. Gruel again. Maybe bread if you still have it. You eat with your hands or from a shared bowl. There are no plates. No silverware. Just a spoon if you're lucky. Often, not even that. There's little variety. No tomatoes. No potatoes. No corn. These foods haven't arrived from the New World yet. Instead, you rely on turnips, leeks, cabbage, beans if you can grow them. The same few staples, cooked the same way, over and over. Flavor is a distant concept. Spice is for the rich. Salt is precious. Butter is rare. Even onions are a treat. You eat what grows, what's stored, what hasn't spoiled. Dinner, the evening meal, is a quiet affair. Families gather near the fire. The light flickers. The bowl passes hands. Some nights it's nothing but boiled water thickened with flour. Others it's stew. If someone traded for a bone or found a root in the forest, you don't eat for pleasure. You eat to survive. Children cry from hunger, even after meals. Mothers hush them gently. Fathers pretend not to notice the last crust taken from their own bowl. Elders sometimes go without so the youngest can eat. Hunger teaches you things. Patience, caution, silence. It shapes how you speak, how you plan, how you live. You count the weeks until harvest. You remember which neighbor stored extra beans. You know the wild herbs that grow along the edge of the path, which are edible, which might make you sick. You learn how to stretch the flour, how to save seeds, how to dig deep into the root cellar and find something, anything to boil into a soup. You hope the rats haven't found it first. In good years, there's a little more. A turnip stew with a chunk of pork fat, a fresh loaf warm from the communal oven, a boiled egg. In rare moments, you smile while eating. But in most years, you chew quietly. You listen to the sounds of the fire. You share food with others, not because you have enough, but because you know they don't. In the wealthiest halls of the land, the lords dine on meat and imported wine. They have spices, butter, saffron. Their kitchens are full. Their tables are crowded. But their food, it doesn't make yours taste worse. Because your food isn't about taste. It's about making it to tomorrow. So you finish your gruel. You tuck the bread away, if there's any left. You blow on your hands to warm them. And you go back to work. Into the fields. Into the forest. Into whatever task the day demands. Your stomach may not be full. But the day is long. And hunger, like the wind, is always waiting. Meat and the mystery of preservation. The scent of smoke lingers in the air, not just from the fire, but from the food itself. If there's meat in your meal today, it didn't come from a butcher's display case. It came from somewhere dark, somewhere dry, somewhere cold. Or perhaps not cold enough. You don't eat meat every day. You don't even eat it every week. For most peasants in the medieval world, meat is a luxury. A thing for feast days, for weddings, for funerals. For the Lord's table, not yours. And when meat does arrive in your village, it's not fresh. It can't be. There is no icebox, no refrigeration, no sealed plastic wrap. If an animal is slaughtered, the clock starts ticking fast. Meat begins to spoil within hours, especially in warm months. You must preserve it, or you must waste it. And wasting meat? That's not an option. So you salt it. Big, coarse grains packed deep into every crevice. It dries the meat, pulls out moisture, kills some bacteria, slows down the rot. But salt is expensive, especially inland. If you're lucky, your village trades with one near a salt mine or coastal works. If not, your meat might go without enough. Too little salt, and the meat spoils anyway. Too much, and it turns to something else. Rubbery, hard, difficult to chew. You soak it before cooking. 4 hours. Sometimes overnight. Just to make it edible. Other times you smoke it. A small smokehouse. Just a shack really, filled with cured strips of pork or goat. The fire burns low slowly. Smoke seeps into the meat, into the walls, into your clothes. The process takes days. You wait. You watch. You hope it works. Or you dry it. Thin strips, hung in the rafters, sometimes crusted with ash or herbs. The air cures them slowly. If the weather stays dry, you succeed. If it rains, or worse, if flies come, everything is ruined. Even then, what remains may not resemble the meat you imagine. It's gray, hard, sometimes sour. You don't taste meat so much as endure it. It's fuel, not flavor. If you're very poor, and most are, you don't even get muscle meat. That goes to the Lord, the reeve, the church. You get what's left. The offal. The liver, kidneys, lungs. The stomach, feet, ears. Sometimes the head. You boil it, stew it, grind it into pies. You make sausage if you have casing. Blood pudding if you have blood. Every scrap, every organ, every piece used. Nothing wasted. Children gnaw on bones long after the soup's gone. Dogs wait patiently under benches for scraps. Sometimes they wait too long and vanish. In the coldest winters, the line between what's edible and what's desperate starts to blur. There are stories, always whispered, never confirmed, of families boiling leather, of scraping lichen off rocks, of cooking bark into broth. You don't ask questions when someone offers a strange-looking stew. The meat you do eat carries risk. Without refrigeration, spoilage is common. Parasites live in undercooked flesh. Bacteria hide in rotted marrow. There's no way to know if the salted haunch you traded for has turned, not until someone falls ill. Stomach pains, fever, sometimes worse. Food poisoning isn't just unpleasant here. It can be deadly. You've seen it before. A child curled on the floor, fevered and pale. An elder who stopped eating after a bad stew. A neighbor who vanished after eating something he shouldn't have. You can't trace the cause. You just call it bad meat and pray it doesn't happen again. Cooking is your best weapon. You boil everything. Even preserved meats go in the pot. A long stew over a low flame. Carrots if you have them, onions if you don't. Barley, salt, water. The broth is often more nourishing than the meat itself. Hunting your own meat? That's a different story. The forests around your village may teem with deer, rabbits, and wild boar, but you aren't allowed to touch them. The woods belong to the Lord. To hunt there is poaching, and poaching is a crime, a serious one. A man caught with a snare in the woods might be fined. Caught twice, he could lose a hand. Caught with a bow and a deer, he may never come back. Still, it happens. In the dead of night, you've heard the rustle of movement beyond the trees. You've smelled fresh blood when no feast was planned. You've seen a neighbor with meat he couldn't explain. You say nothing. You eat in silence if invited. Rabbits are sometimes tolerated. Pigeons, too. Eels from muddy creeks. If you're clever and quiet, you might add one to the stew pot. But the danger is always present. Not just from the law, but from the meat itself. In towns, preservation takes on new forms. Butchers hang carcasses from beams. Smokehouses crowd narrow alleys. Spices, if you can afford them, might hide a meat's bad smell. Not improve it, just mask it. And yet, even in these conditions, people crave meat. They dream of it. They save for it. They tell stories about it. The returning soldier who ate roast swan in France. The merchant who tasted venison soaked in wine. The baker's daughter who once had salted beef on Christmas Day and still talks about it 5 years later. Even the church understands this hunger, which is why it regulates meat so strictly. No meat on Fridays. No meat during Lent. No meat on fast days, which come often. Fish becomes the alternative. River fish for the poor. Salted cod for those near ports. Well, again, always eel. The church says fasting is good for the soul. That meat feeds the body, but not the spirit. That to give it up is to become closer to God. So you listen. You obey. But part of you always hungers. Not just for meat, but for what it represents. Warmth, comfort, abundance. A meal where you don't worry if someone else in the family will go without. When a pig is slaughtered in your village, perhaps once or twice a year, the entire community gathers. Nothing goes to waste. The intestines are cleaned and used for sausage. The fat is rendered into lard. The blood is caught and cooked. Even the hooves are boiled. It is a feast, not in the modern sense, but in the way that a full belly feels sacred. For one night, everyone eats, truly eats. And for one night, the memory of hunger grows quiet. But the next day, it returns. Because meat is not normal. It is not daily. It is not safe. It is preserved. It is shared. It is rationed. And above all, it is rare. So you go back to bread and gruel. You wait for the next feast. You tend your goat. You clean your pot. And you hope that whatever meat comes your way next, it is enough. He lords feast and what it cost. You've spent your life watching the manor from a distance. A large stone house perched on a slight rise, above the thatched roofs of your village. Its windows are few, but larger than yours. Its doors are wood, carved with symbols, and its chimneys send up smoke that smells richer than anything from your own hearth. Then, one day, you're summoned inside, not as a guest, not as an equal, but as a servant, a runner, a kitchen hand, a scullion. You are brought into the manor house to help prepare for a feast. This is the world of the Lord, the man who owns your land, who collects your taxes, who holds power over your life. His house is larger, warmer, louder. It is filled with noise, with servants, with things, and it smells different. You step inside and your senses are immediately overwhelmed. A long wooden table is being set in the great hall. Candles flicker. Tapestries hang from the walls, thick, woven with scenes of hunts and battles, lined with dust. The floor is covered in rushes, strewn with herbs meant to cover the smell of bodies, dogs, and spilled food. The kitchen is the heart of the manor today. Fires roar, pots boil, and on a great wooden slab, meat is being prepared, more meat than you've seen in a year. There are birds with feathers still clinging to them. Long, pink cuts of venison. A whole pig, splayed open and ready for roasting. The kitchen reeks of flesh and heat and smoke. You're handed a basket of herbs. Sage, thyme, rosemary, spices you rarely smell. You're told to crush them and mix them with wine. It's not for flavor, not really. It's to cover the rot. Because even in the manor, preservation is a challenge. Meat spoils quickly. In winter, it lasts longer. But in spring and summer, it turns fast. And the lords are impatient. They want feast, not caution. So the cooks add cloves, cinnamon, pepper. These are imported from far away, Asia, Africa, the Levant, carried by ship, sold by spice merchants, traded at enormous cost. Pepper alone can cost more than gold. But here, in the manor, it's used freely, not to season, to disguise. You're not tasting the meat, you're tasting what hides the smell. You watch as pies are assembled. Not sweet pies, though some are, but meat pies, filled with rabbit or eel or pigeon. Eggs are added. Cream, if there's any. The pastry is thick and tough, more crust than delight. It's meant to preserve, to hold the filling together through long hours of baking. The bread is white, truly white, made with fine wheat flour, sifted again and again to remove the bran. Unlike the dense, dark loaves in your village, this bread is soft, light, almost sweet. It crumbles when torn. It's prized for its color, not because it's healthier, but because it means the wheat was pure, expensive, rare. You're told not to touch it. Wine flows freely, red and white, sweet and dry. Imported or made locally by the abbey. There is no ale here. No weak barley water. The goblets are metal, some silver, some pewter. Servants test each one before handing it over, not to check the temperature, but to make sure it's not poisoned. Poisoning is a fear at this level of power. As the feast begins, you're sent to the edges. You serve, you watch. You do not eat. The lords and their guests arrive dressed in layers of wool, velvet, and fur. Their fingers are ringed with silver. Their hair is combed and perfumed. But they do not use forks. They eat with their fingers, or with knives. Trencher bread is used as a plate, thick slabs that soak up juices, then are tossed to the dogs or the poor. A man grabs a leg of goose with his bare hands. Another dips bread into gravy and slurps it. A woman laughs with wine-stained teeth. Dogs bark under the table. Bones are thrown aside. Voices rise. Laughter echoes. There's music. A small group of minstrels plucking lutes and flutes. There might be a jester. There might be a fool. Entertainment is as much a part of this as food. A feast is not just for nourishment. It is for display. It shows power, wealth, generosity. But the display has a cost. Not just in coin, though each spice, each cut of meat, each barrel of wine is a heavy expense, but in health. These meals are rich, over-rich. The guests eat far too much. Portions are massive. Courses keep coming. Meats, stews, pies, pasties, fruits soaked in wine, custards and creams and sweetened almonds. There's no balance, no moderation. Many suffer for it. The Lord grows heavy. His face is red with wine, his hands greasy with fat. You've heard stories of his gout, a swelling in the feet and joints caused by excess. He limps now. He eats sitting down, but struggles to stand. Others speak of heart pain, of breathlessness, of sudden illness. To be rich is to feast, but to feast is to suffer. Then there's the hygiene. The manner may be grand, but cleanliness is not. The same hands that feed the dogs feed the guests. The same knives that cut raw meat slice the bread. The rushes on the floor absorb spills, grease, and worse, but are not changed often. Chamber pots are emptied out windows. Wash basins are shared. Soap is rare. Illness spreads quickly. Rich and poor alike fall ill. But only the rich are surrounded by so many and dine in such crowded, smoky spaces. You've seen lords with fevers that won't break. Ladies whose faces pale over weeks. Servants who vanish without explanation. Still, the feasts go on, because power must be shown. Opulence must be performed. A lean table is a sign of weakness. A thin lord is an insult. Guests must leave stuffed, overfed, half days from indulgence, and afterward the leftovers. You are allowed, if lucky, to take scraps, bits of pie, bones with meat still clinging, the trenchers soaked in juice. You bring them back to your family, and for one night you taste what the manor eats. It is rich, heavy, salty, spiced, and it leaves you thirsty, and it makes your stomach ache, and it does not sit well. You realize slowly that the feast is not better, only different. It is abundance with consequence, luxury with cost. In your village, you are hungry, often, but your body knows your food. It's plain but honest. It sustains. It doesn't overwhelm. In the manor, they are never hungry, but they are never well. As the feast ends, you haul clean. You gather bones, wipe surfaces, sweep the rushes. The hall smells of meat and wine and sweat. You walk back to your cottage under moonlight. In your hands, a crust of white bread. In your belly, too much. You lie down on straw and close your eyes. And you are grateful, in a strange way, for the simplicity of hunger. Fast, faith, and food rules. You don't decide what you eat in the Middle Ages. The church does. You wake up one morning to the same hunger, the same chores, the same aching muscles. But as you reach for the crust of bread left from the night before, your wife reminds you, it's Friday. You sigh and pull your hand back. No meat. Not today. It's not just a custom. It's not a personal choice. It's law. God's law, handed down through priests, monks, and centuries of doctrine. The calendar isn't ruled by the seasons alone. It's carved into feasts and fasts, saints' days, and holy observances. There are over 180 days a year where meat is forbidden, not including Lent. Fridays are the most common. The church teaches that Jesus died on a Friday, so every Friday is a day of remembrance, a day of sacrifice. That means no flesh from animals that walk on land. But not all flesh is banned. Fish, creatures of water, are still allowed. The logic is theological, not nutritional. It doesn't matter that fish is harder to catch, costlier to buy, or barely available in your village. What matters is obedience. You are poor. Fish is rare, so you go without. Maybe you mash up peas into a mush, or boil barley. Maybe there's a leak in the garden. If you're lucky, a few dried herrings salted and buried in the pantry last winter. You chew slowly. You try not to envy those who live near rivers or closer to monasteries with their fish ponds and loaves of soft bread. Then Lent arrives, and everything changes. Lent is 40 days of fasting, leading up to Easter. It's meant to echo Christ's own fast in the desert. It's not just meat that's banned now. Butter, milk, cheese, eggs, all forbidden. Animal fat, off the table. Even rich, boiled broths are suspect. You switch to almond milk if you can afford it, or oat milk if you cannot. Oil replaces butter. Your meals grow thin, watery plain. Lent isn't just a season. It's a trial. The church insists this is good for your soul. The less pleasure you take from food, the more focused your mind will be on prayer and repentance. Hunger is holy. Cravings are crosses to bear. And it's not just Lent. Advent is a lesser fast 4 weeks before Christmas, meant to prepare you for Christ's coming. Ember days arrive each season, clusters of fasts to mark the natural world's turning. Saints' days litter the calendar, and while some are feasting days, others come with strict prohibitions. So you keep a mental calendar, or more likely, a church bell's rhythm. You don't eat until Mass is done. You don't cook meat until the priest says you can. You don't question it, but you feel it. Your body doesn't understand theology. It just knows it's tired. Even feast days come with rules. On a saint's feast, there may be more food, maybe even a roast if someone's been saving, but the expectation is spiritual first. Mass, confession, procession. The body comes second. You see this most clearly during Lent's midpoint, the Annunciation. It's March 25th. Winter stores are low. Spring growth is barely begun. Yet people celebrate. The Virgin Mary's promise of birth is a cause for joy. But joy still wears hunger's mask. Cakes made with no butter. Stews with no meat. The celebration is more symbolic than indulgent, but not for everyone. In a manner, the rules are bent. You remember delivering grain once during Lent. You entered through the kitchen yard and saw a monk standing in the doorway, talking to the cook. On the table was a pigeon pie, fresh from the oven, rich with butter, eggs, meat. You said nothing. You never say anything. But you remember. They claim it's for the sick, for the children, for exceptions. The truth is, privilege buys flexibility. The rules tighten around the poor, around you. Then comes the debate about butter. In some regions, it's permitted during fasts. In others, strictly banned. The line is blurred, and you hear arguments from the pulpit about it. Butter is fat. Fat comes from cows. It should be banned. But what if you can't afford oil? What if you live too far north, where olives won't grow? The church answers with a compromise. Buy a dispensation, pay a fee, and you may use butter. It's framed as charity. Your money goes to the church. You get to cook, but you have no money. So you go without. You learn to fry with water. You scrape by. And the rich eat buttered porridge and smile behind church walls. The food rules extend even to when and how you eat. During fast, meals are taken only once or twice a day. Sometimes only after sunset. Snacking is frowned upon. Indulgence is sin. You remember one Easter vigil, sitting in the chapel. The fast had lasted over a day. No meat, no dairy, no joy. The priest's voice echoed in Latin, and your stomach twisted. So loudly it drowned out the amen. Then, finally, Easter morning, the fast breaks, and the feast begins. Eggs, cheese, sausage, if anyone managed to preserve it. Pancakes fried golden. Honey on bread. Everything that was banned comes rushing back. The joy is overwhelming, not just because the food is rich, but because you've earned it. You've survived the test. And in some twisted way, it makes the meal taste better. Not because it's delicious, but because it was denied. That's the genius of the food rules. They create contrast. When you eat poorly all year, every flavor becomes sacred. The church understands this. Denial feeds desire. The stricter the fast, the greater the feast. The deeper the hunger, the louder the prayer. There's no such thing as neutral eating. Every bite carries moral weight. Are you honoring the fast? Are you too indulgent? Are you gluttonous? Are you holy? Even children feel it. They're told to skip sweets during Lent, to pray when they crave, to watch their parents model obedience, even when their bellies grumble. The seasons move on. Summer brings more vegetables. Autumn, the harvest. But the calendar always loops back. Another fast, another feast, another Friday with nothing but beans and water. And through it all, your body learns the rhythm. Feast, fast, eat, wait. It becomes second nature. And in that rhythm, you forget what freedom once tasted like. You don't ask yourself what you're in the mood for. You don't ask what sounds good. You ask only, what day is it? What rules apply? food in the medieval world is not pleasure. It is obedience. And that obedience feeds more than the body. It feeds the structure of medieval life itself. Power, control, faith, order. The church governs not only your soul, but your stomach. And in doing so, it ensures your loyalty through hunger, through habit, through centuries. You bow your head over a bowl of cold pea soup and say grace. Not because it tastes good, but because it's what's allowed. The medieval year was not divided by holidays or vacations. It was carved up by hunger. Every season brought its own battle, a slow war against scarcity, decay, and time itself. And if you lost, you didn't just go hungry. You died. It's winter now. Not the crisp, snow-dusted winters of postcards and fireplaces, but a gray, biting season that stretches on forever. You wake each morning colder than the last. The firewood is low. The walls leak wind. The food is almost gone. Your family huddles around the hearth. You break open the bread you saved from Michaelmas weeks ago. It's hard, green with mold in some corners. But you scrape that off. Everyone eats. There's nothing else. There's no store to run to. No pantry packed with canned goods. No backup plan. There is only what you harvested, what you preserved, what you can stretch. You ration carefully. Turnips, shriveled and soft. Beans, if the rats didn't get to them. A strip of salted meat, more salt than meat now. Cheese, cracking at the edges. You soften it with ale and hope for the best. You remember autumn like a dream. The harvest, frantic, bless, was your one chance. Everyone in the village worked from dawn to dusk, cutting grain, gathering apples, digging roots from the earth. You filled the granary with as much rye and barley as it could hold. Dried herbs and strung onions hung from the rafters. Sausages, too, if you were lucky. Or salted fish from the river, layered in barrels and packed with brine. But time is cruel. Grain spoils. Mice find their way in. Meat dries out or turns. The beer goes sour. The root cellar floods. You do everything right, and still it rots. And if the harvest failed, if the rains came too early or too late, if the frost came before the wheat was cut, if blight took the beans or hail flattened the oats, then there's nothing to store. No margin for error. And it isn't just your household that suffers. The whole village feels it. The blacksmith trades tools for food. The priest grows thinner. The miller's children cough through the night. Hunger doesn't knock. It walks right in. Some winters are survivable. Others are not. You've seen famine before. You remember the year the river flooded in June. The barley drowned in its own field. You remember walking to the next village, 3 miles in the snow, begging for a sack of dried peas. You didn't get it. In famine years, meals shrink to illusions. Bread made with lentil flour. Then peas. Then acorns. Ground fine, mixed with water, and baked into something barely edible. You chew slowly, try not to taste it. Your body notices first. You lose weight. You move slower. You wake up dizzy and walk like your bones are hollow. Then come the fevers, the infections. Your skin splits where it used to stretch. Your mind changes too. Hunger dulls everything. Joy, thought, memory, all swallowed by one ache that never leaves. Still, people go on. You boil nettles. You eat dandelion leaves. You chew bark, though it makes your stomach cease. You boil leather, though it softens into glue. You pray, and then miraculously, spring comes. The sun rises earlier. The mud softens. You hear birds again. You see green. But that doesn't mean food. Spring is the hardest time. They called it the hungry gap, when winter stores are gone, but the new crops aren't ready. It's the season of almost. The fields are alive, but they can't feed you yet. So you plant with shaking hands. Dig with your last strength. Sow seeds you can barely afford to lose. And wait. That's what the medieval world was, a waiting game. Always behind, always short. Always one mistake from starvation. And yet, they feasted. It sounds impossible, but feast happened. Not often. Not in abundance. But they mattered more because of the hunger. A feast was not a gluttonous indulgence. It was survival wrapped in ritual. You remember one, the harvest feast. After the grain was threshed and the apples pressed into cider, the village came together. The Lord allowed it, even contributed a goose or a wheel of cheese. The priest gave a blessing. And for one day, people smiled. There was music, bread fresh from the oven, stew thick with beans and scraps of salted pork, honey drizzled over dried fruit. Children danced. Old women laughed. Someone brought a fiddle. It didn't last, but it reminded you what life could taste like. Feasts were also about control. The manor might host a feast after a successful hunt. Deer was reserved for the nobility. Poaching could cost you your hand. But when the Lord shared his kill, it was theater. A reminder that you were beneath him, fed by his favor. The church held feasts too. Saints' days, Christmas, Easter. But even these came after fasts. Joy had to be earned. Food came at the end of suffering. And there was never enough. Even on feast days, the food disappeared quickly. You remember watching the table, waiting for your turn, praying the trencher would still have meat by the time it reached you. Sometimes it didn't. And yet you celebrated. Because a mouthful of meat after weeks of porridge was a miracle. Because sweetness after bitterness feels holy. Because when life is lived on the edge of famine, even crumbs are divine. You grow clever. You learn how to store cabbage by burying it in sand. You learn that smoked onions last longer than raw ones. You soak stale bread in broth. You make thin stews stretch across 3 meals. You get used to the ache, and you stop expecting anything more. But deep down, you remember. The summer when apples were everywhere. The feast when a neighbor brought goose fat biscuits. The year someone returned from town with salt cod, real fish, and shared it around the fire. Those memories feed you. They keep you planting when the soil feels dead. They keep you threshing when your hands crack. They keep you hoping. Because one good harvest can change everything. That's the cruelest truth. There are years when the rains fall just right. When the wheat grows high. When the root cellar is full. When the goats birth twins. And for one season, life feels easy. And then it slips away. A frost comes early. A war cuts trade routes. A sickness kills half the village. And you're back to scraping mold from crusts. Back to measuring hunger against hope. Back to feasting on the edge of famine. Hunger's legacy. It's easy to think of food as comfort, as celebration, creativity, even self-expression. In the modern world, you pick what you crave. You scroll, click, and taste. You flavor things with choice. But in the medieval world, food wasn't pleasure. It was power. It was survival. It was a mirror, one that reflected class, control, and a person's place in a world ruled by scarcity. You didn't eat what you wanted. You ate what you could. From the moment you were born into a thatched cottage or stone manor, your plate was pre-written. If you were poor, your world was built from barley. If you were noble, your table overflowed with things peasants couldn't even name. And no matter how hungry you were, the rules never bent in your favor. Bread, for the average person, wasn't a side dish. It was the dish. Every meal. Every day. Not the fluffy white loaves you might imagine, but dark, dense, heavy rounds baked from rye, oats, or beans. Bread so tough it needed soaking. Bread stretched with dust or bark when times grew lean. And even that could run out. You learned early what hunger felt like. It didn't just visit after a missed meal. It lingered. It shaped your bones, your growth, your children. It crept in quietly and stayed for years. Those who controlled food, the lords, the church, the market towns, didn't just hold grain. They held your fate. You worked the fields, but the harvest was not your own. You grew oats, but paid your rent in eggs. You sold cheese, but never tasted it yourself. A bad harvest didn't just mean a lean year. It meant prices surged. Lords stocked their cellars. Monasteries hoarded their stores. And you ate nettles and prayed. Class was written in the bowl. The richer you were, the whiter your bread. Poor bread was coarse. Rich bread, fine. It sounds simple, but in practice, it meant everything. In a famine, the rich had options. In a feast, they had variety. For the poor, variety didn't exist. Not in taste. Not in texture. Not in time. And this wasn't just about flavor. It was about meaning. A noble's meal sent a message. It was a display of wealth, of status, of divine right. Tables groaned under roasted swan, peppered eel, and wine spiced with cinnamon. Meals were performances crafted to impress, to remind everyone who ruled and who served. A peasant's meal sent a different message: survival. Gruel, porridge, beans, bread, again and again. You didn't eat to celebrate. You ate to work. And sometimes, even that was a luxury. The church shaped your appetite as much as poverty did. Through fasts, feasts, and rules etched into the calendar, they taught you when to hunger and when to feast. Over half the year, meat was forbidden. Dairy disappeared during Lent. Hunger became holy. For the poor, this made little difference. They rarely saw meat anyway. But for those slightly better off, it added pressure to obey, to abstain, to align your body with spiritual discipline. Food was never just food. It was faith, identity, order. It was also risk. Eat spoiled meat and fall ill. Eat too little and grow weak. Eat during a fast and face moral judgment. Food was laced with fear, with danger, with invisible rules that changed with place and time. It wasn't just hunger that defined medieval eating. It was anxiety. And those anxieties didn't end with a meal. They shaped the body. Malnutrition wasn't rare. It was expected. Thin limbs, sunken eyes, rotting teeth. Children died from diarrhea, from moldy grains, from infections caught in kitchens where animals and people shared walls. Food safety was primitive at best. Preservation was trial and error. Salt could help if you could afford it. Smoking, drying, fermenting, these were skills born from desperation, not science. You grew up knowing how long milk lasted in summer, when cabbage turned sour, what meat smelled like before it killed someone. You watched what your neighbor ate. You watched what was missing from their table. And when famine came, as it often did, you watched who survived. Not everyone did. The Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 left entire regions emptied. Rain drowned fields. Grain rotted. Livestock starved. People dug up roots, boiled shoe leather, ate grass. Some stories say they dug up graves. Some say they didn't have to, the streets filled with corpses soon enough. Those who lived learned something deep: food is never guaranteed. That truth lived in the next generation. And the next. It shaped culture. Peasants clung to heirloom grains. Villages held harvest festivals to mark the line between survival and disaster. Recipes were oral, flexible, built around what was available, not what was ideal. And across class lines, food became memory. The taste of honey, once a noble's prize, became a dream for peasants, a flavor spoken of, not tasted. The smell of roasting pork marked a celebration. The crunch of an apple in October, a miracle. What you ate became who you were. Not just your rank, but your history. And for many, that history was painful. Even in towns where markets offered more choice, food was tied to labor. You worked, you ate. You begged, you hoped. You stole, you risked the stocks. Bread riots weren't uncommon. Starving people don't wait politely. They stormed bakeries, broke into granaries. The powerful answered with soldiers, not bread. Sometimes the baker got the blame. In France, during shortages, bakers were hanged for making loaves too small. Not because they caused the famine, but because they were visible. Because people needed someone to punish for their hunger. Food caused unrest, but it also caused control. If a lord controlled the granary, he controlled the village. If the church controlled the fast, they controlled your soul. If a tax collector took your hens, you couldn't make broth. If work came through, they took your stores. And so people clung to rituals, blessings before meals, superstitions around harvest, prayers for rain. Food was fragile, and the line between eating and starving too thin to ignore. You didn't take it for granted. And that was the legacy. Today, hunger might seem distant. But in the medieval world, it was woven into the fabric of daily life. Into every bite, every spoon, every missed meal. Food was never neutral. It was survival. It was scarcity remembered, in stories passed down, in recipes designed to stretch, and fear that lingered after winter. It was also identity. You could guess a person's class by the bread they ate, by whether they ate fish on Friday, by how often they tasted meat, by whether their stew came from a pot or a roast. And this identity lasted. When the Black Death came and changed everything, killing millions, upending the social order, those who survived remembered the hunger, remembered what it meant to go without. Some became richer. Some took land. Some moved into abandoned houses and filled their tables. But they never forgot. That's the thing about food in hard times. It never fades. It sits in your stomach, yes, but also your mind. It becomes caution. It becomes culture. And centuries later, we still echo it. In holiday feasts, in fasting traditions, in sayings like, waste not, want not, in bread as a symbol of life, in the way families pass down recipes that began not as indulgences, but as tools for survival. So when you picture the medieval table, don't picture abundance. Picture silence. A bowl passed hand to hand. A crust torn carefully. A breath before eating, not out of prayer, but out of fear it might be the last bite for a while. This was hunger's legacy, not just in the empty belly, but in the quiet memory that food, once taken for granted, can disappear, and that those who remember will never look at a loaf of bread the same way again. Now the fire burns low. The bowls are empty. The bread is gone. Just crumbs remain, scattered across the wooden table like tiny memories of what was. A pot of stew, cold now, sits in the corner, and a wooden spoon rests inside, its handle smoothed by years of stirring, scraping, serving. You lean back against the rough stone wall of your cottage. Your stomach isn't full. It rarely is, but you've eaten something. That alone makes this day better than some. The room is quiet. Your family has gone to bed. A child snores gently beneath a pile of wool. Someone stirs in their sleep. Someone coughs once, a small, tired sound, then settles again. Outside, the wind moves through the trees. It rattles the shutters. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl calls. The scent of ash and boiled cabbage still lingers in the air. You breathe it in without thinking. You're not hungry anymore, but you remember the hunger. You always do. You lived a day, maybe more than a day, in the skin of someone long gone. Someone who never scrolled through a menu. Who never tasted chocolate or tomatoes or tea. Someone who never knew what it meant to eat for fun. Now what it meant to eat for survival. You learned the rhythm of meals shaped not by want, but by need. You broke hard bread, soaked in broth. You stirred gruel that smelled of earth. You salted meat and hoped it would last. You watched your food rot too quickly. You rationed it too slowly. You learned the cruel math of calories and time. And still you lived. That's the thing about medieval people. They endured. Not because they were stronger or braver than us, but because they had no choice. Their lives were tied to the land, to the weather, to the whims of fortune and fate. They didn't chase comfort. They waited for it. They didn't expect meals to be exciting. They expected to have to earn them. And often, they expected nothing at all. You remember the boy in the field, chewing bark because there was no bread. You remember the old woman boiling weeds into a bitter soup. You remember a father giving his portion to his child, hoping it would be enough. You remember a feast once with music and roasted meat and honeyed apples, and how quickly it ended. You saw how food shaped society. The bread you ate told the world who you were. Black bread meant you were poor. White bread meant someone else had power. Fish meant it was Friday. No meat meant it was Lent. Empty bowls meant it was winter, or worse, a year without harvest. And abundance, when it came, never stayed. You saw how food wasn't just nourishment. It was language. A plate full of spices whispered of trade routes and conquest. A salted fish told of coastal winds and long journeys. A bowl of beans spoke of soil and peasant hands. Everything you ate or didn't eat carried a story. And you now carry those stories too. Because you didn't just read about medieval hunger. You sat beside it. You lived it. You followed the kitchen smoke through thatched rooftops. You stepped into the stone halls of castles and smelled roasted boar. You bent over garden plots and dug your food from the ground. You stood in line at a manor's feast, unsure if there would be anything left when the trencher came to you. You stirred beans over fire while rain leaked through the ceiling. You broke your fast with stale barley and called it good. You weren't a tourist in history. You were a guest at the table. And now, as your mind drifts, as your breath deepens, as the soft weight of sleep presses against your chest, you remember not just what they ate, but how they lived. With patience. With quiet strength. With a kind of wisdom we've forgotten. They knew how to wait for seasons. They knew how to plan for winter. They knew how to make soup from almost nothing. They knew how to share, even when there wasn't much to share. They didn't count calories. They counted seeds. They didn't worry about trends. They worried about mold. They didn't take pictures of food. They gave thanks for it, even the bad parts. Even the bitter, thin, tasteless parts. You see, in a way, hunger taught them something we've lost: gratitude. Not for luxury, but for sustenance. Not for flavor, but for survival. Gratitude for the bread that filled your belly just enough. For the onion that lasted another week. For the neighbor who shared her cabbage. For the feast that didn't come often, but came just when you needed it. You imagine now what it felt like to taste something new, something rare. A piece of fruit in spring. A sip of fresh milk. Crust of cheese. You can almost taste it, can't you? That strange, simple joy of eating after going without. That's something modern life rarely gives us. But medieval life, it offered it every day. Every meal was an answer to a question. Will we eat today? You close your eyes. You think of them, the women tending fires, the boys chasing chickens, the monks brewing beer, the bakers sweating in their ovens, the hunters returning empty-handed. And, their lives were hard. But they mattered. Their stories are written not in books, but in bowls. In the tools they left behind. In the scars on their hands. In the recipes that still echo stew, bread, porridge, and prayer. And maybe tonight, as you drift deeper into rest, you'll dream of one of them. A girl with dirt on her feet, sitting under an apple tree, hoping the frost doesn't come too early. A farmer weighing grain by hand, listening to the wind, hoping for rain. A cook stirring a pot over flame, humming a hymn under her breath. They're all still there somewhere, in the taste of the past. And now so are you. So sleep now. Let the medieval world fade into silence. Let the fire die out. Let the fields grow quiet. You've eaten your fill of history. You've tasted what time forgot. And tonight, you'll carry those stories with you into dreams. Because in the end, history isn't just battles and kings. It's bread. It's hunger. It's the quiet echo of people simply trying to eat. And somehow that makes them feel closer than ever. Good night, traveler. Sleep well. And remember, you are always welcome at the peasant's table.